Sochko destroys the flat earth. Here's what all of your proofs are worth. Willy Sochko destroys the flat earth. If you actually buy this shit, then I legitimately feel bad for you because you're wrong, and here's why.
Hey everybody, look at the shirt my mom bought me. Okay, let's get right to it.
39. Practical distance measurements taken from the Australian Handbook Almanac Shippers and Importers Directory state that the straight line distance between Sydney and Nelson is 1,550 statute miles. Their given difference in longitude is 22 degrees, 2 minutes, and 14 seconds. Therefore, if 22 degrees, 2 minutes, 14 seconds out of 360 is 1,550 miles, the entirety would measure 25,182 miles. This is not only larger than the ball Earth is said to be at the equator, but a whole 4,262 miles greater than it would be at Sydney's southern latitude on a globe of said proportions.
So I was unable to get a hold of a copy of the Australian Handbook Almanac Shippers and Importers Directory without paying money. I'm a little strapped for cash right now, but I decided to go ahead and check that distance myself from Sydney to Nelson. I'm going to assume you mean Sydney, Australia to Nelson, New Zealand, even though you didn't specify. Checking multiple sources here, it's either 1,309 miles, 1,308 miles, 1,310 miles, 1,312.9, or 1,309 again. Now, these do vary slightly by several miles. This isn't really alarming, given that those estimates probably don't use the exact same starting and ending points. Like Sydney, Australia is a big city. Also, some of those are flight paths, which are going to be from airport to airport rather than from city center to city center or coast to coast. So you'll get that variability of a few miles. I mean, it's to be expected, but I didn't even have to go on the internet to get some estimate for the distance between Sydney and Nelson. I'll show you. I've got a globe here, and I also have a clear, slightly flexible ruler. So I'm going to go ahead and measure the distance between Sydney and Nelson. Okay, let's see if we can get a shot of this. Okay, well there you see Sydney, Australia, and there's Nelson, New Zealand. So we're just going to go right ahead and put one end at Sydney and one end at Nelson. And it looks like we've got a measurement just shy of 2 inches. And 2 inches on this globe is 660 miles. See, 660 miles per inch. So 2 times 660 is 1,330. And since it was just under 2 inches, then I can assume that the distance in the real world from Sydney to Nelson is just under 1,320, or 1,320 miles. So it's a pretty fair guess for that's the real life distance between Sydney and Nelson. Now, what I did here was I went through and I did the math myself. Redid the same math you did, but with the actual distance from Sydney to Nelson. It turns out here that through cross multiplication, I got a equator distance of 21,420 miles, not the 25,000 something that you said was more than the equator of the Earth. I got something less than the equator of the Earth. Now, that number is still a little bit longer than the latitude at Sydney, but I'm not really a mathematician, so I can't exactly explain this as well as one who is. But you see, Sydney and Nelson are not on exactly the same latitude. They're diagonal from each other, so when you draw a straight line to go around the globe that touches between them, it will actually go further around the globe than just a simple latitude line will. I hope you can understand that. Yeah, let's see what I wrote in my notes. The latitudinal circumference of a sphere is smaller if you go straight around the sphere than it is if you go at an angle, I guess. Now, I still do wonder where you got the estimate that it was 1,550 miles between Sydney and Nelson, Australia. And I think I might actually have an idea. Ports.com is a website that gives you actual real-life distances between various seaports. And I went ahead and entered in the sea route distance between Port Sydney and Port Nelson, which is not a straight line, but actually goes east, then south. And that is 1,558 nautical miles. Nautical miles, which are longer than regular, or as you call them, statute miles. 1,558, and that's not too different from the 1,550 that you gave. Now, I can't prove this, but I have the feeling that this shipping almanac from the 1800s gives sea route distances in nautical miles between various ports in the Australia-New Zealand area. And you took that nautical mile sea route value and said, no, that's what it is in a straight line with regular miles, because then you could have a source that you that you unaccurately cited, and then use that to further your argument somehow. But I don't know. What do you think?
40. From near Cape Horn, Chile, to Port Phillip in Melbourne, Australia, the distance is 10,500 miles.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's actually near half that.
41. Similar calculations.
I'm not going to waste my subscribers' time forcing them to listen to made-up numbers that generate false conclusions through phony calculations.
42. In the ball Earth model, Antarctica is an ice continent which covers the bottom of the ball from 78 degrees south latitude to 90 and is therefore not more than 12,000 miles in circumference. Many early explorers, including Captain Cook and James Clark Ross, however, in attempting Antarctic circumnavigation, took 3 to 4 years and clocked 50 to 60,000 miles around. The British ship Challenger also made an indirect but complete circumnavigation of Antarctica, traversing 69,000 miles. This is entirely inconsistent with the ball model.
They were explorers trying to detail the coastline of Antarctica in a completely dangerous and inhospitable environment back in in a wooden ship in the 1600s and 1700s. Like the fact that they even fucking survived the voyage is remarkable. But while this journey is of course still difficult today, it wouldn't be quite as difficult. For example, Lisa Blair, an Australian woman who became the first woman to ever circumnavigate Antarctica by herself. She did it in 184 days. Not 3 to 4 years. And that's actually a little bit slow for some of the estimates I've been finding online.
43. If Earth was a ball, there are several flights in the southern hemisphere which would have their quickest, straightest path over the Antarctic continent, such as Santiago, Chile, to Sydney, Australia. Instead of taking the shortest, quickest route in a straight line over Antarctica, all such flights detour all manner of directions away from Antarctica, instead claiming the temperature's too cold for airplane travel. Considering the fact that there are plenty of flights to, from, and over Antarctica, and NASA claims to have technology keeping them in conditions both far colder and far hotter than any experienced on Earth, such an excuse is clearly just an excuse, and these flights aren't made because they are impossible.
You know what? Let's just go ahead and go to Quora.com for this one. And no, they don't use the cold temperature as some sort of excuse. You know what? Screw it. I think if you're watching this kind of video, you're interested in this kind of subject matter, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole answer. You tell me if it sounds reasonable. This is an interesting question, and there are 3 reasons why no commercial flight overflies Antarctica. Geography. Due to the arrangement of the 3 populated southern continents, flying over Antarctica wouldn't actually be shorter for most routes. South America, Africa, and Australia form a rough triangle at the bottom of the world, and the shortest leg between their airports misses most of Antarctica. It's kind of hard to tell because the bottom of the globe gets in the middle of the way, but see, there's America, and that's Africa, and Australia around here. Still, there are a few routes which would make sense, and the shortest route isn't always the best, since one must also consider prevailing winds. I read that it would be favorable to fly Sydney to Buenos Aires, currently the southernmost flight, at 80 degrees south over Antarctica rather than 72 degrees, the Great Circle, due to winds. ETOPS rules covers where twin jet engines can fly. Antarctica is considered off limits for twin jet engines, even though it's technically land. This isn't a real roadblock since there are a good number of 4-engine jets that don't need to abide by ETOPS, but it limits the type of plane that theoretically could fly there, and thus rules out all but the largest jets. So any flight over Antarctica would have to connect large enough cities to fill a large 4-engine jet, bringing us back to the answer about geography. The real reason no commercial flight overflies Antarctica is that there are special aviation rules for flights that do. These rules were designed for sightseeing flights but apply to commercial flights as well. Planes flying below 72 degrees latitude need special survival equipment on board, and no commercial carrier would want to stock planes with all this stuff just to save a bit of fuel. It would limit the number of seats available, see the ETOPS above, and would require special equipment and training. This could seriously screw up the airline's schedules. So that's why no commercial flight overflies Antarctica. I'm sorry to those of you who want more, but I'm gonna have to go ahead and end this video right now. Because the next 5 proofs are all about the trajectories of commercial airline flights and how they would seem to make more sense on a flat Earth than on the globe. And I kind of want to give that its own episode, its own attention. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. I really wanted to make this one a musical one like the last episode was, but it just wasn't possible given, current circumstances. Although I will be getting a new audio interface again soon. So it won't be too long until you do see, bigger musical productions back up on this channel again. Man, was this one a doozy. This one took more work than any of the other previous ones. And the future ones are probably going to take even more work, so yay. Love you guys. Leave a like and a comment. That way I know that you still care to see these. I'm still going to make them either way. You're a sap, Mr. Jap. You make a Yankee cranky. You're a crook, Mr. Gook. You need a little spanky. Oh, God. I should stop watching those frickin' World War II Popeye cartoons.